Why reliability, not only firepower, decides war. In the theater of World War II armored warfare, campaigns were won not merely by the most dramatic gun or thickest armor, but by machines that could be taken from the factory floor to the battlefield and kept running. This truth was dramatically illustrated by the fate of two iconic tank programs, the American Sherman line and the German Panther, Tiger complex. A captured Sherman named WW2, torn from Tunisia's desert and subjected to months of German testing, would illuminate a brutal, almost clinical, fact about modern warfare. Reliability and maintainability trump raw capability when logistics and production realities bite hardest. The story embedded in a single tank and the thousands of miles of testing that followed reframes the war not as a duel of abstract specs, but as a contest of industrial maturity. The seed of the comparison, a Tunisian capture that unsettled a Reich of numbers. Mid-February 1943, a Sherman M4A1, USA 306-7641, captured intact in North Africa, rolled to a halt under an exhausted sun, its star emblem still visible beneath a hastily painted German cross. The crew of a German reconnaissance unit rolled it, measured it, and noted something startling. The vehicle did not overheat, the transmission did not fail, the final drives did not falter. The conclusion seemed counterintuitive to a doctrine built on the authority of meticulously engineered German tanks. This was not just an isolated triumph of an American engine. It was empirical evidence that a mass-produced tank, designed with automobile industry principles in mind, could sustain operations in desert conditions where even seasoned German designs broke down. The WW2 narrative becomes the hinge on which the rest of the war's armored history swings. It is a case study in what industrial depth, rather than sheer weaponry, can achieve on a battlefield. Section: What Kummersdorf testing revealed about design philosophy. Spring 1943, at the German proving ground near Kummersdorf, the Sherman entered a laboratory of blunt truths. German engineers documented layer after layer of findings, staging a rigorous, almost forensic, examination of a vehicle not built in their factories, but designed for mass production elsewhere. The Sherman's transmission, with 5 forward speeds and 1 reverse, featured synchronization in gears 2 through 5, reducing the need for double clutching and making driving accessible to soldiers with ordinary automotive familiarity. This contrasted with German approaches, which demanded highly trained specialists for operation and maintenance. The herringbone gears used in the Sherman drivetrain distributed stress across teeth, a design choice that German engineers had once considered too delicate for mass production. Yet the Americans had been producing them in the thousands. The engine, the Continental R975 in this example, proved tolerant of a wide range of operating conditions, maintaining power and temperature stability in a desert climate that would have strained rival designs. Narrative arc, from bench tests to battlefield implications. The Kummersdorf tests weren't just mechanical dry runs. They mapped a shift in strategic calculation. German engineers measured track tensions, tested cooling systems, and disassembled components to understand where patterns. They compared range, fuel consumption, and endurance under simulated combat loads. What they found was not a single fail-safe flaw, but a systemic difference. The American approach accepted margins, designs built to last, with big tolerances and interchangeable parts, that allowed a vehicle to be fixed quickly with minimal specialized tools. The Sherman's powertrain was built to endure. Military logistics could replace a broken piece with another from a shared stockpile without forcing a unit to halt for weeks. The German answer to this was hamstrung by a combination of resource scarcity, bombing disruption, and a legacy of precision manufacturing that did not translate smoothly into mass maintenance on a war scale. Section: Reliability in practice across theaters. The Kummersdorf data translated into operational realities. In Kursk-like campaigns on the Western Front, Panthers could reach the battlefield, but their mechanical reliability lagged behind. Field reports showed Panthers suffering from final drive failures and issues in the transmission that kept vehicles sidelined long enough to lose momentum. The Sherman, by contrast, could keep moving on a sustained tempo. By late 1943 and into 1944, German testing and field data began to converge on a sobering conclusion for the Panzer elite. mass-produced American tanks delivered through civilian manufacturing channels, complete with standardized parts, cross-manufacturer interchangeability, and maintenance practices drawn from decades of civilian auto industry experience, were operating with far higher readiness rates than German designs could sustain under the pressures of war production. Section: The numbers behind the narrative, without losing the human angle. Readings from German testing and combat units painted a clear picture. Panther readiness in 1943 often fell well below usable levels, with some periods showing 16% readiness during major operations and only gradually climbing into the mid to high tens as production and repairs improved. In contrast, Sherman readiness routinely sat well above those figures, supported by a logistics network calibrated to churn out parts and vehicles in the tens of thousands. The diesel variants of the Sherman, such as those with GM 6046 diesels, demonstrated fuel efficiency advantages that became critical as German fuel reserves dwindled. Even when not perfect in every metric, the Sherman line's capacity to be repaired, maintained, and returned to the field quickly mattered more than the absolute horsepower or armor thickness. Section: The broader industrial lesson, American manufacturing as a strategic asset. The industrial story behind the Sherman isn't merely about better engineering. It's about how a country's civilian manufacturing ecosystem translates into military resilience. The United States was not just producing tanks. It was leveraging a mature supply chain, standardized components, and a culture of continuous improvement across competing firms. The result was a platform that could absorb upgrades to engines, transmissions, and armament, without tearing up the manufacturing blueprint. The German experience, meanwhile, shows the risk of over-indexing on theoretical performance while underinvesting in sustainment through shortages, sabotage, and strategic bombing. The Kummersdorf findings fed into post-war thinking about tank design and military-industrial policy. When West Germany later designed the Leopard 1 in the 1950s, the lessons from American reliability and manufacturability guided decisions to prioritize maintainability and growth potential as core objectives. Section: The counterpoint, firepower and doctrine aren't irrelevant. This analysis does not erase the German achievements or the tactical genius behind German commanders who exploited their tank strengths in specific contexts. The Panther's agile gun and armor could dominate in a carefully chosen battlefield conditions. The Tiger could devastate at longer ranges. Yet reliability remained the decisive constraint. The Blitzkrieg era had trained many German designers to value performance on paper, but the later war years highlighted a gap between theoretical capability and operational reality. The WW2 case demonstrates that a battle-tested concept, an automobile-derived reliability framework, could outpace a theoretically superior but industrially fragile system. Section: New facts and perspectives this narrative reveals. Mass production thresholds and interchangeable parts. The Sherman's design benefited from components that could be swapped across manufacturers and variants, reducing downtime and enabling rapid scale-up. This is a practical realization of production smoothing in wartime, a concept less visible in narratives focused solely on torque curves or turret traverse. Automotive engineering culture and driver training. The Sherman was intended to be operable by soldiers with basic automotive familiarity, reducing the training burden and enabling widespread readiness. German doctrine assumed highly trained technicians would be available. The operational reality of a war economy strained those assumptions. Fuel strategy and diesel versus gasoline. German supply lines increasingly constrained fuel availability, making the Sherman's diesel and gasoline variants, including GM 6046 diesels, an operational advantage in range and endurance. This nuance adds a logistic dimension to the reliability debate that is often glossed over in high-level discussions. Post-war influence on armor design. The Leopard 1's emphasis on reliability and maintainability can be traced conceptually to the Kummersdorf findings, illustrating how wartime testing shaped Cold War tank development beyond immediate combat outcomes. Conclusion: the enduring lesson of WW2. The WW2 narrative is less a single dramatic victory and more a succinct lesson in the economics of war. The most effective weapon is one that works when needed, not the one with the flashiest numbers on a data sheet. The Kummersdorf testing showed that American automotive engineering principles, standardization, mass production, ease of maintenance, and design margins produced tanks that could be kept in the fight far longer than the German designs that demanded specialized care and scarce parts. This reliability, more than firepower or armor, determined operational effectiveness and, in a broader sense, helped shape the strategic outcomes of late-war Europe and the post-war evolution of armored warfare.